folks out on the interview, no problem. We've got no problem at all with it.
This is the nitty-gritty time as far as being nervous, you know.
Elvis Presley wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was a walking contradiction. From secret FBI files to disturbing habits and backroom betrayals. Here are 20 facts even lifelong fans never knew about Elvis. Controversial Memphis Mafia. Elvis didn't travel alone. Wherever he went, a tight-knit group followed. Friends, bodyguards, employees, the so-called Memphis Mafia. Dressed in matching outfits and living off Elvis's generosity, they were more than an entourage. They were his bubble. He paid their salaries, bought them cars and homes, and let them into every corner of his life. To outsiders, they looked like loyal protectors. But inside Graceland, they became gatekeepers, shielding him from the world and, eventually, from reality. As his reliance on prescription drugs escalated, few dared to challenge him. Some even helped enable it. Their loyalty blurred into dependency. And by the end, Elvis was surrounded by yes-men who watched him spiral while enjoying the perks of his fame. It was a toxic circle he couldn't escape. And when the end finally came, it didn't feel real. Not to them, not to the fans, and not to the millions who questioned what really happened that night. Mysterious death and conspiracy theories. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor at Graceland.
Elvis Presley died today. He was 42. Apparently it was a heart attack. He was found at his home in Memphis, not breathing.
He was 42. The official cause? Cardiac arrest.
His road manager tried to revive him. He failed. A hospital tried to revive him. It failed.
But almost immediately, questions swirled. Medical records showed he'd been prescribed over 10,000 pills, sedatives, amphetamines, and narcotics in just the last year. Many suspected a cover-up. Some fans refused to believe he died at all. Sightings poured in for years, at gas stations, airports, even a Michigan supermarket. Theories exploded. Elvis faked his death to escape fame. The body in the coffin wasn't really him. His cousin reportedly took $18,000 to snap a secret photo of the corpse, later splashed across tabloids. At the funeral, tragedy struck again when a car crashed into mourners outside Graceland, killing 2 fans. The chaos didn't end with his life. If anything, it deepened his legend. And even in death, Elvis still had one last rivalry, one fueled by pride, politics, and pop supremacy. Elvis versus the Beatles rivalry. At first, Elvis admired the Beatles, 4 British boys who idolized him. But admiration didn't last long. As their fame skyrocketed, so did tensions. Elvis reportedly despised John Lennon's anti-war stance, calling him un-American. Behind closed doors, he even urged the Nixon administration to revoke Lennon's U.S. visa. To Elvis, Lennon's activism clashed with the patriotism he held dear. Their one meeting, in 1965, was cold and awkward. What should have been a passing of the torch felt more like a silent standoff. The irony, Lennon once said, "Before Elvis, there was nothing." But by the end, Presley saw the Fab Four as a threat, not just to his reign, but to the image of America he believed in. And while this transatlantic rivalry simmered in private, Elvis's personal beliefs were taking him in a very different direction, toward something sacred, something he never abandoned until the very end. Under FBI surveillance, to millions, Elvis was the king. But to some in the US government, he was something else entirely, dangerous. In the 1950s, the FBI began monitoring Elvis Presley. Why? His wild stage moves, hip thrusts, mic riding, and that unmistakable swagger were seen by some officials, clergy, and psychologists as sexually corrupting America's youth. One report labeled his performances a striptease with clothes on. Another warned that his influence was arousing teenage girls beyond normality. Even his autograph habits, like signing girls' thighs or stomachs, were added to the case files. Ironically, Elvis considered himself deeply patriotic. But to the Bureau, his massive cultural pull made him unpredictable and potentially subversive. They never arrested him, but the attention never went away either. For years, his name sat inside locked filing cabinets in D.C. And yet, while the government watched him closely, so did the world. especially when he pulled off a broadcast stunt that no one had seen before. Aloha from Hawaii concert. In 1973, Elvis Presley pulled off a performance that made television history. Broadcast live via satellite, Aloha from Hawaii was the first global concert of its kind, airing in over 40 countries and reaching up to 1.5 billion viewers. That's more than the Apollo 11 moon landing. From the Honolulu International Center, Elvis stepped onto the stage in a white bejeweled jumpsuit, cape flaring behind him. He was larger than life, confident, commanding, magnetic. The show cost $2.5 million, a staggering sum at the time, but worth every penny. Fans around the world saw the king in his element, electrifying, precise, and still capable of commanding hearts. But while the world saw glamour, backstage was different. His health was in decline, and the backstage silence often echoed louder than the crowd's cheers. Elvis's secret cosmetic surgery. By the mid-1960s, Elvis's public image was everything, and he knew it. While fans saw a natural heartthrob, those closest to him whispered about subtle changes. Behind closed doors, Elvis reportedly underwent multiple minor cosmetic procedures, including a nose job to narrow his bridge and chin implants to sharpen his jawline. The man who once oozed raw Southern charm had begun sculpting himself to match the screen idols of the time. He was obsessed with appearance, plucking his eyebrows, dyeing his hair jet black, and demanding absolute control over how he was photographed. Some say these tweaks were fueled by insecurity. Others point to the pressure of maintaining perfection in the spotlight. He never publicly admitted to the procedures, and his inner circle kept it quiet. But the man in the mirror was no longer just Elvis from Tupelo. He was becoming something else, a myth, a legend, and a mask he could never fully remove. Tragic start to life. Elvis Presley was born on January 8, 1935, but he wasn't supposed to arrive alone. Just 35 minutes earlier, his identical twin brother, Jesse Garon Presley, was delivered stillborn. That loss left a void in the Presley household that never truly healed. Elvis grew up as the twin who survived, a shadow that followed him all his life. His mother, Gladys, became obsessively protective. She clung to Elvis, and he clung back. Their bond was intense, almost sacred. Meanwhile, his father Vernon went to prison when Elvis was just 3, leaving the family financially devastated and emotionally strained. This early trauma carved deep insecurities into Elvis: loss, abandonment, and a need to feel wanted. Some say it fueled his obsession with fame and loyalty. He wasn't just performing for crowds. He was filling a silence that began the day his twin never cried. And once the world heard his voice, it never stopped listening. Struggling childhood. Elvis Presley's early life was defined by poverty, instability, and a search for comfort. His family had almost nothing. Vernon Presley, his father, struggled to hold jobs, and when he was sent to prison for forging a check, Elvis and his mother Gladys were forced to rely on relatives and welfare just to survive. They moved often, wore hand-me-downs, and lived with the constant stress of not knowing what tomorrow would bring. Elvis was a quiet, awkward boy who never quite fit in. At school, he was teased for his clothes, his manners, even his silence. He wanted to escape, to find a safe place, and he didn't know it yet, but that moment would change his life forever. Because when Presley began attending the Assembly of God Church, something clicked. There, gospel music rang through the walls. The power, the emotion, the raw humanity of it all, it sank into him, and that sound would never let go. Because the next time he stepped up to sing, the room didn't laugh, they listened. His first public performance. At 10 years old, Elvis Presley wasn't the type of kid anyone expected to get on stage. He was quiet, poor, unremarkable in class. But when a teacher overheard him singing Red Foley's Old Shep during morning prayer, she encouraged him to enter a local talent show. It was a small event, just a fair in Tupelo. But for Elvis, it was everything. Dressed in borrowed clothes and holding a guitar that had seen better days, he stepped onto the stage and sang. No one laughed, no one interrupted. And when he finished, the crowd clapped. He didn't win first place, but that moment gave him something far more powerful: belief. People saw him, heard him, and wanted more. That performance lit the first real spark in his life. It told him that maybe, just maybe, music could be his way out. But what really changed everything was a mistake in the studio that no one saw coming. Army draft at peak fame. In 1958, Elvis Presley was the biggest star on the planet, and then the draft notice arrived. He could have pulled strings, avoided service, or joined a cushy performance unit. But Elvis didn't. He insisted on serving as a regular soldier. No special treatment. Reporters swarmed Fort Chaffee when he arrived. Flashbulbs popped, fans cried. The king was trading in his mic for a rifle. What shocked people more wasn't just that he served, but how seriously he took it. He trained hard, followed orders, and earned the respect of fellow soldiers. Even during a 2-week leave, he quietly recorded 5 songs in Nashville before heading back to duty. But behind the discipline, the fame, and the cameras, something was shifting. While stationed in Germany, Elvis met a young girl named Priscilla, and once she entered his life, everything, his image, his future, his family, started to change. Massive wealth. Elvis didn't just break records, he rewrote the business of celebrity. In 1956, he earned $50,000 for 3 appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show, a jaw-dropping sum at the time. As his fame exploded, so did his earnings. Movie deals, merchandise, global tours. Elvis was a money machine. By the time of his death in 1977, his estate was worth around $5 million, roughly $20 million today. But for all his fortune, Elvis couldn't buy peace. Behind the gates of his mansion, the cracks were forming, and the next loss would cut deeper than fame ever could fill. Mother's death and emotional collapse. No one understood Elvis like Gladys Presley. She wasn't just his mother, she was his anchor, his protector, his entire world. So when she fell ill with hepatitis in 1958, Elvis rushed home from his army base in Germany. But it was too late. Just days after he arrived, Gladys passed away from heart failure. Elvis was shattered. At her funeral, he sobbed uncontrollably, clutching her coffin. Friends said it was the first time they saw the king truly break. He never recovered from that loss. Not really. It left a hole in him that fame, fans, or fortune couldn't patch. Some say his emotional decline began that day. He started leaning more heavily on prescription pills and retreated deeper into isolation. And though life moved on, his need for love and control only intensified, which made his next relationship, one that began with a child bride, all the more complicated. Secret White House meeting. In December 1970, Elvis Presley made an unannounced visit to Washington, D.C. Not for a concert, but for a mission. Wearing a velvet suit and carrying a letter he'd written on a plane, Elvis marched up to the White House gates, requesting an urgent meeting with President Richard Nixon. The topic? America's growing drug crisis. Elvis wanted to be appointed as a federal agent at large in the war on drugs. He believed his fame could help reach disillusioned youth, and he craved the symbolic power of a federal narcotics badge. Surprisingly, Nixon agreed to meet him. The two posed for a now iconic photo, and Elvis got his badge. But behind the patriotic pitch was a dark irony. Elvis was already deep in prescription drug use himself. While he called out the dangers of addiction publicly, he was privately losing control. Private movie screenings. When the lights of the stage dimmed, Elvis escaped into the flicker of a projector. He rented out the Memphian Theater in Memphis for private midnight screenings. Just him, his inner circle, and reels of his favorite films. No crowds, no paparazzi, no pressure, just cinema. He watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail so many times he could recite it. Other favorites included Patton, Rebel Without a Cause, The Pink Panther. For Elvis, these late-night rituals weren't just about movies. They were a coping mechanism. As his public image became heavier to carry, these private hours gave him space to breathe. But the shadows he tried to outrun in the theater always returned by daylight. And the music that made him famous was about to evolve into something bigger than anyone expected. Pioneer of rockabilly. Before Elvis, genres like blues, country, and gospel lived in separate worlds. But he fused them into something raw, rebellious, and electric, rockabilly. In 1954, his first release with Sun Records shattered the mold. It had the emotional grit of blues, the twang of country, and the rhythmic pulse of something entirely new. His slurred vocals, heavy rhythm guitar, and driving backbeat were the blueprint for a genre no one had named yet, but everyone felt. It was fast, messy, sexual, and real. And in a segregated America, it shocked both sides of the color line. To some, it was liberation. To others, a threat. But Elvis didn't just perform rockabilly. He personified it. The way he moved, the way he dressed, the way he broke every rule. It wasn't just music. It was cultural rebellion. And while the world danced to this new sound, Elvis was about to experience a kind of love that nothing could top. Special bond with daughter Lisa Marie. When Lisa Marie Presley was born in 1968, something changed in Elvis. For all his fame, wealth, and chaos, becoming a father brought out a tenderness rarely seen in public. He adored Lisa Marie, spoiling her with gifts, rides on his private jet, and late-night visits to the stables at Graceland. She wasn't just his daughter, she was his grounding force. Even after his divorce from Priscilla, Elvis remained closely involved. Friends said he lit up whenever Lisa Marie was around. She had free run of Graceland, and he treated her more like a best friend than a child. But the life she grew up in was anything but normal. Lisa Marie witnessed the growing instability, the mood swings, the medications, the entourage. Still, she never stopped defending him. Their bond endured beyond his death. And as the public kept watching, so did another powerful group, one that saw Elvis as more than a pop icon, but as a threat. His lifelong faith in gospel music, long before the glitter and the screaming fans, Elvis's voice rose from a church pew. Gospel wasn't just music to him, it was home. He grew up singing in the Assembly of God Church, where harmonies shaped his soul long before rock and roll took center stage. No matter how chaotic fame became, Elvis always returned to gospel. It was his anchor. Even at the height of his career, he recorded full gospel albums. How Great Thou Art won him his first Grammy. In private moments, he often gathered friends for impromptu gospel sessions, sometimes singing until sunrise. His faith wasn't performative. It was personal, deep, and constant. To those who only saw the rhinestones, it might seem out of place. But to Elvis, gospel wasn't a side genre. It was the truest expression of who he was. If you want to uncover the darker side of Elvis's life, the secrets he tried to keep hidden, click the video on your screen now. Don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow fans, and leave a comment below with your favorite Elvis moment. We'll see you in the next one.